This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Afghanistan's president speaks from the UAE as reports say 3 have been killed in anti-Taliban protests in Jalalabad. Rebels kill at least 47 people in the northern part of Burkina Faso. And 7 people die in flash flooding in Addis Ababa. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm Mahia Mututa. Also coming up, in business, South Africa's working citizens to contribute up to 12% of earnings to new government-backed fund. And in sports, Cameroonians have their say following Tuesday's draw for the Africa Cup of Nations. Our correspondents Girum Chala in Addis Ababa and Patrick Oyet in Juba will be joining us live for more stories across Africa. We begin with Afghanistan, where President Ashraf Ghani has defended his decision to leave Kabul and confirmed that he is in the United Arab Emirates. In a video posted on his Facebook page, Ghani says he did not run away and is working on returning to Afghanistan. He says he supports talks between the Taliban and former Afghan President Hamid Karzai. On the same day, the city of Jalalabad saw anti-Taliban protests where at least 3 people were reportedly killed. There have also been reports that the Taliban have been blocking Afghans from reaching the Kabul airport. The group has urged people to leave the premises after 12 people were killed from gunshots or in stampedes. Evacuation flights continue as Western nations scramble to get diplomats, civilians and eligible Afghans out of the city. Zmaria Lai Abbasin reports.
Well, the situation in regard to Jalalabad city, yes, we also got reports and the health officials confirmed that 3 people killed and dozen more injured, like they say 12 people injured. And that thing was something shocking because the people of Afghanistan, particularly the young people, they are demanding their national flag, which they have been living under for more than 20 years now. Today, Kabul also see the same thing, and I was seeing in Wazir Akbar Khan, the diplomatic place, there is a hill, and there was a huge flag of Afghanistan, which was distributed by Indian government during at the end of Hamid Karzai era. It's already down, and there is no flag. Whether the Taliban haven't put their own flag, but people are now protesting. It's Independence Day in Afghanistan, but it's much calm and silence all over the city. Somehow we can hear the voices of those protesting to safeguard their national flag, the tricolor flag that they have been living under for 20 years.
Well, let's get more insights on that story now. Zmaria Lai Abbasin, who is a freelance journalist in Kabul, joins us live now. Zmaria Lai, UN aid agencies are warning of a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. What can you tell us about the situation right now?
Hello there. The situation is retreating in military era. It's already an unprecedented situation. No civilian casualties at most of the cities nowadays since the Taliban have taken over the country and particularly the capital. And there are very rare reports of the assassinations and killings and casualties at all. But in humanitarian era, it's a catastrophe happening in the country. As the UN agencies and other aid agencies have already reported that more than 18.5 million Afghans are in a catastrophic situation regarding the humanitarian graph in the country, and it will increase and fears erupt about this situation. The humanitarian crisis that Afghanistan will face is the result of power vacuum and no systems. Afghanistan banks are closed. Afghanistan biggest exchange markets are closed, and all other monetary systems are down in the country, and rarely some of the companies that are exchanging money and the monetary system are just activated from last day. This is a catastrophic situation for Afghanistan, already doomed economy, and there are fear it will fall because the central bank is suffering without any head, without any system at the moment, and already paused and postponed all the activities. The hundreds of development projects and all around the country are now in uncertainty, and there is no progress. Ad agencies are mostly fleeing the country. They're concerned, and everything is almost reached to zero. That's why most economic experts in the country are concerned about the future. It's all dependent now up to the Taliban, how they tackle the political system.
And Zmarilai, you do mention the economy there. The Taliban does now control the Afghan economy. What does this then mean, and what plans do they have to kickstart the economy, which has in the past been shaped by fragility and aid dependence?
Whether the Taliban have been talking about their development and economy program since the peace process of Afghanistan has started, but there is no seemable project or plan for this that the media or anybody else have seen, but they claim they have plans for everything in the country. That's why they were demanding United States, UN and other aid agencies to stay operating in Afghanistan, and they pledge they will control all the sides which is regarding to their activities and their security concerns. But this is a major question, whether the Taliban have the plan. It's all related to the power vacuum, what will come next in Afghanistan political system, and all those things that is related to the society and communities well-being and development programs, which is now struck, shattered, and already paused and postponed.
All right, Zmarilai, thank you very much for speaking to us. Zmarilai Abbasin, freelance journalist, joining us live there from Kabul. Moving on, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration says domestic airlines and civilian pilots will be allowed to fly into Kabul to conduct evacuation and relief flights. But it says that'll need prior approval from the Defense Department. President Joe Biden has given a heads up that U.S. troops may stay in Afghanistan past an August 31st deadline to evacuate Americans. And for those still trying to leave Afghanistan, the Pentagon says its military doesn't have the ability to reach people beyond the Kabul airport. CGTN White House correspondent Nathan King has more.
Well, outwardly, this White House is projecting calm and saying that they will increase the number of Americans and Afghans with special immigrant visas out of Kabul International Airport in the coming days. There is nervousness because this administration knows they are only 1 or 2 American deaths or others away from an even bigger crisis. There is finger pointing all over Washington about why it's been so chaotic, considering this withdrawal was essentially inevitable. Did they pull out too many troops too soon and trust the Taliban?
Currently, the security situation at the airport is stable. However, there are threats, and we're closely monitoring those. At any moment, they could happen. We can identify them. If we identify them, we will take immediate military action without hesitation in accordance with our rules of engagement. And the Taliban and every other organization in that country knows it.
The question about the Taliban, of course, in cooperation over Kabul International Airport. In the last 24 hours, the figures were that 1,100 Americans left on 13 different flights. So far, about 3,300, although we're going to get new numbers by the close of business on Wednesday. So far, several thousand, we think it's between 2,000 and 3,000 Afghans with special immigrant visas have been flown out of the country, not all to US, but some to third countries as well. But I can tell you, I was on a call with a refugee advocacy group here who have essentially started a legal case against the State Department, saying that congressional laws essentially say you have to bring out about 100,000 of these people, including their families, you are bound by law to do it, and they want it to happen quicker. The problem is, of course, is that this hasn't been planned. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
Meanwhile, rebel fighters have killed at least 47 people in Burkina Faso. The attack took place near the northern town of Arbinda on Wednesday. State media has reported that during an exchange of gunfire, 13 soldiers were among those killed. At least 16 rebels also lost their lives. The fighters linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL regularly carry out attacks in Burkina Faso and neighboring Mali and Niger. Violence in the Sahel has continued to intensify despite the presence of thousands of UN, regional and Western troops. Well, for more on that, we're now joined by Fahiraman Rodrigue Kone, a senior researcher with the Sahel team at the Institute for Security Studies based in Bamako, Mali. Fahiraman, a new wave of violence does seem to be spiraling across the West Africa's Sahel region. Why is that the case?
This objects of the attack and at a regular interval indicate a strengthening of the jihadist group and also a limitation of the counterinsurgency strategies of the national armies engaged in the fight against terrorist group. The armies in the region are facing technical and strategic difficulties. And first, there is a difficult control of a large space. The Sahel region is a very large space. Is about 5.3 million square kilometers, and this is it facilitates the rapid movement of the group in a context where there are porous borders. And also the armed forces anticipation capacities also remain weak, and how to anticipate and respond to the enemy. There is not a rapid reaction, and that explains why there is this upsurge in attacks in those last weeks.
And Fahiraman, what has been the impact then of violence on civilians, especially with regards to learning and food production?
The civilians are already paying a heavy price of this violence. They are the first victims in terms of death and in terms of fatalities. And we are in the middle of the raining season here in the Sahel region. And this attack could also seriously disrupt the field works and also affect the harvest with a high risk of food crisis in the coming months.
All right, Fahiraman, thank you very much for speaking to us on CGTN. Fahiraman Rodrigue Kone, senior researcher with the Institute for Security Studies, joining us live in Bamako. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Ethiopia should peacefully resolve the Tigray conflict. Erdogan made the comments during a joint news conference with visiting Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. CGTN's Robert Nagila tells us more.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's visit to Turkey comes amid an ongoing conflict in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region. The conflict began in November after a political fallout between Abiy and the leaders of the Tigray region. The leaders had dominated Ethiopia's government for nearly 3 decades. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is calling for a peaceful resolution of the conflict in the region.
Ethiopia is going through a sensitive period. We discussed the developments and latest situation in the Tigray region. The peace, tranquility and integrity of Ethiopia, which has a strategic location and importance in Africa, is important to us. We attach great importance to the resolution of existing problems within the framework of temperance and the preservation of peace and stability in the region.
President Erdogan also says his country is willing to mediate between Addis Ababa and Sudan for a resolution of the border dispute.
Tensions between Sudan and Ethiopia, both our friends, in the Al-Fashaga region were in our agenda. We also discussed this issue with Mr. Al-Buhran, the chairman of the Sudanese Sovereignty Council, which I hosted in Ankara last week. I expressed to them that I sincerely hope that the conflict will be resolved within the framework of dialogue and good neighborliness between the two countries. In this regard, as Turkey, we are ready to make any contribution to an amicable resolution to the problem, including mediation.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says the situation in Ethiopia's Tigray region is unpredictable and volatile. According to UN spokesman Stephanie Dujarric, humanitarian access into the region remains restricted, with extended delays for clearances of humanitarian supplies.
And turning to Ethiopia, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that the situation in Tigray remains unpredictable and volatile, while movement of Tigray forces in Amhara and Afar provinces continue. Humanitarian access into the region remains restricted via the only road through Afar region, where there is insecurity, with extended delays for clearance of humanitarian supplies and intense searches of trucks at these checkpoints. Only 30 trucks with humanitarian supplies can be scanned each day under the current procedures. But as we've been telling you, we need 100 trucks of food, non-food items, and fuel needed every day to go into Tigray. Humanitarian operations are also severely impacted by lack of supplies, cash, banking services, fuel, and telecommunications, transport of ICT equipment. It remains prohibited by the authorities.
Thousands of people have been killed in the 9-month war. The conflict has spilled into Ethiopia's Amhara and Afar regions in recent weeks, displacing hundreds of people. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, let's get more on that now. CGTN's Girum Chala joins us live from Addis Ababa. Girum, what's the latest you can tell us about the situation in Tigray?
Maya, in the north, the conflict between the government force and TPLF is ongoing at the moment, and in at least 5 battlefields, most of them in the Amhara and Afar regional states, bordering towns between Tigray and these 2 regional states is happening. And the conflict is, of course, causing a lot of human loss and damage to property. And at the same time, the people who are being affected by the day is increasing. According to the UN, hundreds of thousands of people are now being victims of this war, at least when it comes to them needing humanitarian services every day. So the conflict in the north is continuing, and there's no sign of it stopping at the moment, unfortunately.
And Girum, as we heard from that previous report, Turkey's President Erdogan has urged a peaceful resolution to the conflict in Tigray. How has the government there reacted to that?
Well, Maya, so far the Ethiopian government has said nothing officially about President Erdogan's proposal of trying to broker peace between the TPLF force and the government. But earlier today, the spokesperson of the Ethiopian Foreign Ministry has appreciated Turkey's efforts when it comes to its support of the Ethiopian, urge and quest of peace in the north, and also the agreement signed in the military sector and the development and water sectors at the same time. I think the Ethiopian government at the moment, to be honest, is considering all options available on the table so that this...
All right, CGTN's Girum Chala joining us live there from Addis Ababa. Let's now go to South Sudan, where over 30 civilians have been killed in 2 days of intercommunal clashes. The violence took place in the restive Warrap state in central South Sudan. Warrap is the home state of President Salva Kiir. Violence has been widespread in a number of areas in the state, including Tonj North and Tonj East counties. Warrap's information minister, Ring Deng, says the clashes involve 3 neighboring communities of Luanijang, Lupaher and Tik. He attributed the cause of the violence to cattle raids. Government efforts are underway to reinforce security in the restless areas. Well, CGTN's Patrick Oyet joins us from Juba with more. Patrick, what is the latest on the killings?
Yeah, the latest is that fighting at least has now stopped. The fighting started on Sunday evening. It continued on Monday and Tuesday. It stopped on Tuesday, late Tuesday. And the fighting actually came as a result of cattle raiding, because in this time, this is rainy season, the area is flooding, people have lost their livelihoods, and for that matter, therefore, they are turning to livestock. And this is what we have seen happening in most times in these areas like Warap, where one community goes and raids cattle from another community, and because the guns are in the hands of so many people, it normally results into clashes, and in this situation, it involved 3 communities. So basically, that is what happened with the issue of the clashes. There, more than 30 people have been killed.
All right, CGTN's Patrick Oyet joining us live there from Juba, South Sudan. Thank you for that. At least 7 people have died after heavy rains in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Rivers burst their banks in the capital, causing flooding. According to local media reports, dozens of people have been injured and are being treated in different hospitals. Through his Twitter account, Addis Ababa's acting mayor, Adanek Abibi, says the damage to life and property was severe in several areas in the city. The mayor is urging residents to take necessary precautions as heavy rains are expected in the coming days. Well, Coletta Wanjohi is following up that story for us. She joins us live now from Addis Ababa. Coletta, what more can you tell us about the floods?
Well, Mahia, we're just from the location about an hour ago, and you can vividly see, much as it happened on Tuesday, the impacts of the damage are still very vivid. And what is notable is that there is a river that flows right behind the compound that was affected. And the compound we're talking about is a seminary that hosts several students who are boarders, so, students who have come to take up different theological related studies and others. So those who are affected mainly where the death happened is a compound that is right at the end of this seminary compound, which is within it, where there was a family that lived there. The students there tell us those were mainly teachers and maybe people who work at the seminary who live there. And for example, there's a family that went with the floods, died because of the floods, a whole family. But also what is notable is that we still have some buildings. For example, one of the main buildings of the seminary, the theological center, is still submerged in water. Probably the citizens, the students we've talked to, some of them who are still there who couldn't go back home, say that they have had to move to another dormitory that was not affected, but one of the dormitory was really affected, and you can see that from the dirt levels on the wall, you can see how high the water went. So, it's a sad moment. People are still there trying to reel from the whole impact of it all, and people not believing, because one of the people we talked to told us that it's the first time they are seeing that, despite having a river passing just behind the compound.
A worrying situation indeed, Coletta. But what then is the government and other organizations doing to help?
Well, we've seen the Addis Ababa City Administration, that is in charge of the city, of course, moving in as early as possible in terms of rescue, in terms of trying to salvage whatever they could. As of yesterday, we had the firefighting teams that were there trying to assess the damage and trying to salvage and save as many people as they could. And they're the people who removed people from the mud, because it's so much mud. If you're there, you can see so much mud from the floods. So there are people who are removed from the mud because of by the city administration. And the city administration has also said that it took some people to hospitals, some people are being attended to medically. But I think the biggest bit to it all will be how the city administration will have to sit down and agree with this theological center on the way forward, because there will be another rainy season. This is ending, but there will be another rainy season in the future, and they will have to decide on what to do. If the theological center will remain there, what will happen so that the river, which will not move, of course, how they will ensure that we don't have accidents like this in the future. Probably that will be the lasting solution that the city administration will look at after ensuring that the current short-term problem is solved.
All right, thank you very much for speaking to us. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi joining us live from the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. Well, Uganda is also currently experiencing flash floods in the western part of the country. Several people have lost their lives while property and crops have been damaged. Aid agencies are also warning that humanitarian relief is urgently needed. Leon Senyange reports from Kasese on the latest situation in the affected areas.
A scene of devastation. This is what is left of Bulembia village in Kasese district, western Uganda. 2 weeks of relentless rain meant the nearby river Nyamwamba broke its banks, leaving a trail of destruction and death. This search team is looking for the body of a 23-year-old man who was washed away in the flash floods.
From the game park, all people around along the river, we have to join hands to make sure we find this body. We can't do any work. You can't go digging, you can't do anything before we can find this fellow.
The search team has spent 2 days walking through the rubble and still no success. The worry, the search may be called off if the rains persist. Although heavy rains are expected around this time of the year, the situation could worsen for vulnerable families like Donald Asiku's. He can only look on at what was.
That house you are seeing behind there, that's where I live. Initially, my banana plantation, cassava plantations have gone.
The Red Cross says hundreds of people have been affected by multiple flash floods in this area and is warning of the need for immediate humanitarian relief.
We have identified a number of needs, from wash needs, from health needs, and above all the shelter.
Government pleas for the people to leave this area have fallen on deaf ears. They say they have nowhere to go, but can only pray and hope to stay alive. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kasese, Western Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live. Here's what's coming up on the program. The WHO says vaccine injustice is a shame on all humanity. And Kenya's government urges citizens to get inoculated.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Now, the World Health Organization says vaccine injustice is a shame on all humanity. And in order to tackle this pandemic, the world needs to work together. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus made the remarks while speaking to reporters in Geneva. The head of the World Health Body says he is shocked that Johnson & Johnson vaccines produced in South Africa are leaving Africa for Europe. He has urged Johnson & Johnson to review its distribution strategy.
To overcome these fragile times, we must do better at sharing resources and health tools. Our mutual resilience is only as strong as our weakest bond. I was stunned by the news that J&J vaccines, fill and finished in South Africa, are leaving the continent and going to Europe, where virtually all adults have been offered vaccines at this point. We urge J&J to urgently prioritize distribution of their vaccines to Africa before considering supplies to rich countries that already have sufficient access.
Well, CGTN's Angelo Coppola is in Johannesburg and has been following up this story for us. Angelo, how has the government reacted to the WHO chief's remarks and threats by activists?
Well, look, no word yet from the government, but we have been speaking to Stavros Nicolaou, who's the Aspen Pharmacare Executive responsible for export business. He told us recently that there's a robust manufacturing cycle in place, which will also carry the company into Q4. He went on to say that the South African government and the AU have indicated that there's an understanding that everything that gets produced at the AFCON facility in Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape in Q4 will remain on the African soil, either for South Africa or for the African Union. So that implies, as I understand it, that what gets produced until the start of Q4 is moved off the continent. Added to which he did reiterate that at the moment, Johnson & Johnson are responsible for shipping and distribution of that vaccine. Aspen are only the contract manufacturer, nothing more. So as it stands now, it seems like there might be a miscommunication between the AU and the WHO. Mahia?
And Angelo, how then are people in South Africa reacting to revelations of vaccine transfer?
Well, look, South Africans don't seem too interested at the moment. This news broke yesterday, apparently, but it appears that they're not really that interested. We aren't seeing any uproar. We aren't seeing any marches in the streets. The vaccines here are generally available across the country. People even have a choice in some instances about which vaccine they want, the single-shot J&J or the double-shot Pfizer. Granted, initially there were some hiccups in the supply, but that's a thing of the past at the moment. The big issue now is vaccine hesitancy in South Africa. People don't want to get vaccinated. So Joe, public on the street, is more interested in getting the vaccine than anything else. And that's probably because J&J have indicated that part of the production, whether it's now or in Q4, is going to remain for South African use anyway. So at the moment, no reaction from the government, no reaction from the man on the street, or the woman on the street for that matter. Mahia?
All right, Angelo, thank you very much for your insights there. CGTN's Angelo Coppola speaking to us on the line there from Johannesburg. Staying with the coronavirus pandemic, the World Health Organization has condemned the rush by wealthy countries to provide COVID vaccine booster shots, while millions around the world have yet to receive a single dose. WHO experts insisted there was not enough scientific evidence that boosters were needed and said providing them while so many were still waiting to be immunized was immoral.
On Wednesday, American authorities announced that all vaccinated Americans would soon be eligible to receive additional doses of the COVID-19 vaccines. This comes even after the World Health Organization had already called for a moratorium on COVID-19 vaccine booster shots. It argues that the booster shots will increase the drastic inequity in dose distribution between rich and poor nations.
I called for a temporary moratorium on boosters to help shift supply to those countries that have not even been able to vaccinate their health workers and at-risk communities and are now experiencing major spikes.
American officials say that while the vaccines remain remarkably effective in reducing the risk of severe disease, hospitalization, and death from the effects of COVID-19, protection could diminish in the months ahead without boosted immunization. Washington had already authorized an extra dose for people with weakened immune systems. Israel has also begun administering third doses to Israelis aged 50 and over. But WHO experts insist that the science is still out on boosters and stress that ensuring that people in low-income countries where vaccination is lagging receive jabs is far more important.
Science is not certain on this. There's clearly more data to collect. But the fundamental ethical reality is we're handing out second life jackets while leaving millions and millions of people without anything to protect them.
The World Health Body has warned that if all countries don't tackle the pandemic together, they risk prolonging the pandemic for years. Wilkes Anyabwa, CGTN.
Right, well, let's get more on that now. CGTN's Robert Nagila joins us live in Nairobi for more on vaccination uptake. Robert, Europe and America do seem to be rushing toward COVID vaccine boosters. How then is this relevant to Africa?
Well, Mahia, it is very relevant to the African continent, especially when you consider that about 80% of the COVID-19 vaccines that have been administered globally have been administered by only 10 wealthy nations. This gives you an idea of the vaccine inequality the WHO has been singing about for the last 7-8 months. Now, the World Health Organization has heavily criticized this decision by the United States to give a booster jab to its population, despite the fact that quite a number of low-income countries have not even given half their population or administered the first jab to half their population. And herein lies the problem. As the WHO keeps singing, no country is safe until every country is safe. Because what happens the next time that a deadlier variant than the Delta variant comes up or emerges? So this is where we're stuck at the moment. You look at Kenya, for example, only 2.7% of the population has been vaccinated. We're talking about 1.3 million people that have received the first jab. So, and there's still a ways to go because we simply do not have enough vaccines. Now, several countries in Europe and the United States are going on with booster jabs. Israel, we know, has been giving booster jabs for a couple of months now. But I hasten to add that the FDA, that is the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, has not approved the booster jab yet, but the fact that the American president has announced it based on scientific evidence, he says, from the CDC, it does look like it will go ahead. But there's a lot of anger on the ground here in Africa, especially in Kenya, where you talk to people and they tell you that, look, we took part in the trials, we took part in the research of some of these vaccines, and we were promised that we would be in the front lines receiving these vaccines. That has not happened. So this inequality looks set to go on for the foreseeable future. Mahia?
And Robert, looking at the numbers, the uptake of COVID vaccines across the continent has indeed been rather slow. What are the reasons behind the slow uptake?
Absolutely, it has been very slow, but the major problem, the major challenge that the African continent is facing at this particular moment is that there are just not enough vaccines. You will recall that about a couple of months ago, where the COVAX facility, which the continent is heavily reliant on, simply did not have any vaccines because developed nations had basically taken up all the vaccines. We were just talking about the South African contract case a moment ago with my colleague in South Africa, Angelo. So that is one of the issues. There are just not enough vaccines available to go around. The other issue is vaccine hesitancy. There's been a lot of misinformation out there, especially on the internet. There have been these anti-vaxxers, people who do not believe in the vaccines, spreading misinformation. And then you just have people who are simply seeking to get more information because governments have simply not explained it well enough to their people that the vaccines are safe enough. But other people like those we spoke to in this report you're about to see simply say that, look, we're just waiting for the one jab because it's more efficient, it's faster, and you're done with it. Let's just have a look at that report. It's early morning at the Kenyatta National Hospital grounds in Nairobi, and already hundreds of Kenyans are lining up to receive their COVID-19 jabs. The government rolled out its second vaccination campaign in July after receiving more than 1 million doses from the United Kingdom, France, and other development partners. But vaccine uptake has been low, especially outside Nairobi. Meanwhile, infections have surged, prompting the government to issue a mandatory order requiring all civil servants to get vaccinated.
They said if you're not vaccinated, you will not be able to access the office. So I came with my colleagues.
This is one of several vaccination centers across Nairobi administering the COVID-19 jab, and the process is fast. On average, they're vaccinating 3 people each minute. Once your details are registered, you receive a message on your phone, and after your first jab has been administered, an alert is sent via SMS with the date of your second jab. But misinformation and anti-vaxxers, those against the vaccine, remain the biggest challenge, and even here, attempts were made to dissuade those waiting to get vaccinated.
When I'm here, as I'm standing here, somebody was discouraging me, but I had decided and I had made my choice from home.
Latest figures show 1.3 million Kenyans have already received their first dose, while 760,000 people have had their second jab. But that's only 2.8% of the population, and the reasons are varied.
I am not against it. I am waiting for the single jab vaccine.
I'll go for the jab. It's just that I have been busy, but I will get it.
For the government, it's a race against time, with much of the current batch of vaccines set to expire in a few weeks. Kenya's expecting close to 4 million vaccine doses in September, and the hope is the vaccination process will kick into overdrive once those doses arrive. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, CGTN's Robert Nagila bringing us the latest on COVID vaccinations here in Nairobi. Well, it's time for us to take a short break. Stay with us. Coming up, it's the latest in business.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Right, it's time for the business on Africa Live. South Africans may be required to contribute up to 12% of their earnings to a new government-backed fund. Earlier this week, the Department of Social Development released its green paper on comprehensive social security and retirement reform. It proposes the creation of a new national social security fund, a government-managed fund which will provide retirement, disability and unemployment benefits. All employers and employees will initially be obliged to contribute up to 12% of qualifying earnings, up to a ceiling which is currently proposed as $18,429 per year. This means South Africans will pay up to $184 a month to the fund. The first 10% of this contribution will go to the mandatory fund rather than to a retirement fund. The next 2% will go towards unemployment insurance. Nigeria's annual inflation dipped for the fourth straight month in July to 17.38%, thanks to a slowdown in food price increases. And that's ahead of the second quarter output data next week. Food price inflation, the major component of the headline figure, eased 80 basis points from the previous month to 21.03% in July, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. However, core inflation, excluding prices of farm produce, rose 63 basis points to 13.72%. The World Bank has said economic growth has resumed in Nigeria after the COVID-19 shock, but lags in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, citing food inflation, heightened insecurity, and stalled reforms increasing poverty. To North Africa now, where Tunisia has paid off a bond loan of $503.5 million issued on the international financial market in 2016. The North African state had also repaid another loan of $500 million in late July, secured from the international financial market in 2014. This comes as it moves to honor obligations for its medium and long-term foreign debts. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi tells us more.
The Central Bank of Tunisia announced that the country's net foreign exchange reserves fell to $6.84 billion, or 120 days of import on August 5th, from $7.3 billion, which corresponds to 129 days at the end of July. Analysts warn that the settlement of U.S. bonds has had a disastrous impact on the economy.
We know also that these two loans have been paid in a very bad way, financially and economically speaking, of course, because the state didn't have the money, and the state had to issue very short-term treasury bills for 3 months only, and the treasury bills were subscribed by the Tunisian banks but bought back the same day by the Central Bank of Tunisia, which meant that the loans have been paid through the creation of currency, which is extremely dangerous for the general balances and equilibriums in the Tunisian economy.
The executive board of the Apex Bank said the lower mobilization of foreign exchange resources in the form of loans and foreign investments have also impacted the foreign balance of payment, bringing down net foreign exchange reserves.
I think what we need is a minimum of $3 to $5 billion needed immediately to start to build the trust again with the international financial market and reassure the market that the Tunisian debt remaining until the end of the year at least will be paid normally and not with a recourse to issuing currency like we did on July 23 and August 5.
Authorities in Tunis are encouraging the country's diaspora to increase remittances in 2021. The central bank governor said these remittances accounted for 32% of Tunisia's foreign exchange reserves in 2019.
Tunisian diaspora remittances are important for the national economy, but there are many obstacles like the exchange rate and the lack of digitalization of some Tunisian banks. Only 22% of our diaspora abroad are interested in investing at home due to a lack of political clarity of the situation in the country and a lack of visibility on investment opportunities.
According to the 2021 state budget, debt services have been impacted by the exchange rate of the Tunisian dinar against the main currencies. Euro-denominated loans represents 54.9% of Tunisian debts, followed by the dollar, which account for 22.3%. According to the Finance Department and Tunisia's Apex Bank, the interest on public debts that will be repaid in 2021 amounts to approximately $1.5 billion. It is down 2.2% compared to 2020. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And that's it for the business. Stay with us here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up in the sport. Cameroonians have their say following Tuesday's draw for the Africa Cup of Nations.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Let's start things off with football. The 24-team draw for the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations in Cameroon took place on Tuesday, with the host nation drawn in Group A with Burkina Faso, Ethiopia and Cape Verde. The draw was conducted by CAF Competitions Director Samson Adamu. He was assisted by some of the greatest African legends, including Cameroonians Samuel Eto'o and Gaël Nganamuit, Cote d'Ivoire's Didier Drogba, Rabah Majer of Algeria and Ghanaian Asamoah Gyan. Cameroonian supporters in Douala have been reacting to the draw as the five-time champions go in search of a sixth title, boosted by hosting the event on home soil.
The draw went well, and I think the toughest group is Ghana, along with Morocco, Gabon and Comoros. Cameroon is doing very well and is in the same pool as teams we have already played, but everything will be decided on the